Welcome back, my passive income investors. To a question we've been desperately waiting to find out because so many of you have been bringing this up in the StockTwits forum watch list here, guys, and that is, would Cathie Wood ever buy in to Mindmed? And it seems like almost a perfect pairing because Mindmed is such a disruptive technology and we kind of know what the outcomes could be. And if those outcomes come into fruition, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars in value. And luckily for you, I found a very hidden gem of an interview that isn't really public right now, but it was with Kevin O'Leary, a few other people, including Cathie Wood, where they touched base on this very topic. And spoiler alert, she's not buying Mindmed, guys. It really sucks. So we're going to break down this video. I'm going to offer some updates and opinions, but before we do, let's just take a quick overview of Mindmed itself, trading down 37.95%, actually performing better than a lot of its industry peers, but that's obviously because it's an industry leader. And yeah, there's no news, guys. I mean, they got added to the FTSE Russell index. They raised like another 19-20 million. They're sitting on a couple $100 million in cash. It's kind of relatively steaming out now. Like there's a lot of hype and drama and all this craziness, and now we're kind of flatlining a little bit, in my opinion. But let's listen to this interview because there's a lot to discuss here.
We're getting some other questions with regard to another investment strategy in terms of like what's referenced as psychedelic, or I had to highlight it here just because there's so many questions that are coming in. Anyone want to shout out on this particular sector?
I'm a big investor in this space. It's very controversial. As you know, these are Schedule I narcotics, psychedelics, MDMA, 18-MC, all these different molecules going into trials. The companies that are successful raising capital are the ones that are not offering any form of recreational drug at the outcome of their trials. They are going under the standard FDA protocol to develop these and prove them as medicines. Mindmed is the one I've chosen simply because in mitigating my risk, they had the most trials with the most molecules. Junior pharma companies are a boneyard for investors. The outcomes are binary. You put up capital, you wait 7-8 years to find out if in fact the medicine makes it through trials. You don't know the outcome. It won't be any different for psychedelics, with the one exception that got me on board here was a CEO at Mindmed, J.R. Rand, who basically walked me through his premise that there hasn't been a new drug for mental illness in 35 years. And as a result, we try and treat people by drugging them more in opioid addiction and anxiety and many other complexities. And there's a lot of promise that microdosing LSD and other drugs might solve for these problems with included therapies. That sounds like a pretty compelling argument to invest. And indeed, last year, Mindmed was an 800% return for me. It's a public company. It's on the OTC, and the company has announced its intentions to list on NASDAQ. Who knows when that'll happen? But the bottom line is they have the most trials, the most molecules, and that's the way I believe you have to mitigate risk. But I warn investors, this is binary, 1-0. You don't know, so you have to allocate appropriately. Yet the outcome is so stratospherically fantastic. If they bring a medicine, it's worth taking some risk.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to keep going on this. We tend not to invest in binary, but we do think in that there are incredible opportunities throughout the healthcare space because of the convergence of three technologies. One is DNA sequencing, 2 is artificial intelligence, and 3 is gene therapies, importantly, CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing. So we think that healthcare is going back into a golden age, the golden age that Genentech launched with monoclonal antibodies in the 80s, took returns up to north of 20% returns on R&D investment. Now that investment is down to 7%. We think this convergence of these three technologies, which from a cost point of view has only been possible recently, is going to create a new golden age in healthcare, which from our point of view could take returns north of 30%. So even better than what we saw in the 80s and 90s.
So, look, folks, I find it really interesting because this is an interesting drug segment, a very fascinating conversation. If there's one thing that I purely do not like, it's the fact that everybody is buying this stock thinking they're going to get rich overnight because it ran up in the past. In my humble opinion, this stock has zero value except for the cash they sit in the bank, but that cash they have in the bank, they're burning like there's no tomorrow, acquiring companies like telehealth and expanding trials, but none of those things really add any value until they have a proven, molecule that they're able to sell and distribute. And one of my biggest concerns with Mindmed is the fact that they have to wait several years before they're ever going to be producing any kind of cash flow, right? Whereas if you look at something, and I don't know why Kevin O'Leary hasn't touched base on something like Red Light Holland that is already legally selling to the legal market. And then in Canada here, we have companies that are private that just got government approval to be distributing these shrooms to people in late stage life and death situations, stage 4 cancer patients. And Numinous even has licenses now to sell to universities and these kind of people that are distributing them. And you just start seeing this nuanced wave happening in California with the decriminalization. You got to ask yourself, guys, is FDA approval the actual track to where we're going to see Mindmed be fruitful and profitable, or are we going to see something more like the MJ market where it's just going to be kind of an open source thing where anybody can kind of just mold it and do what they want without having any patents or direct saying like FDA approval? I don't know exactly what the outcomes are going to be, but I always like to remind you guys to humbly be aware that this company is worth $0, technically just the cash they have in the bank. So don't get too caught up. If you're buying this, you need to have a long-term mindset here, folks. And I find it fascinating that Cathie Wood's opinion on it is very straightforward, which is really just, we don't invest in binary outcomes because, she seems very convicted toward genomics and the future of genomics because we can see the path that we're heading toward. And it's kind of predictable what the outcome is going to be to some varying degree, almost like Tesla, right? Again, we are talking about several year trials, guys. Like these outcomes are so far into the future that yes, like Kevin O'Leary says, it's like buying a lottery ticket with the odds being maybe 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 2,000 of working out, but it's still completely 1 or 0. So I understand why Cathie Wood would not be buying it. These companies need to have a path of least resistance to becoming profitable and changing the future. And even though I think these substances are going to change the future of mental health, it isn't appropriate to presume that Mindmed might be the only one. And if you want to rebuttal that with me, it comes back to the same point when you're looking at emerging industries. Step back in time, folks. Do you remember when MySpace was the largest social media platform worth over $400 million? Maybe not. Maybe you're a little too young for that, but I certainly do. And it is wild to think that it didn't take much longer for Facebook to wipe them out and become a $700 trillion market cap conglomerate that pretty much dominated the social media front. That could very well happen with any of these psychedelic companies if they don't start finding a niche relatively soon, or again, the government steps in and just changes the way they look at it or regulate it to try and fast track help. Because again, guys, these things just grow in the wild. They grow everywhere. It's just like MJ products. Now, LSD, MDMA, all these other substances, a different story. Now, currently where I sit, I don't own any Mindmed. I did own a lot. I am planning on buying back into it. I'm glad that I sold out relatively at the good prices because I plan on buying it within my corporation. All of my growth stocks I'm transferring into a corporate account, so they're run outside of my personal name and I can trade them and pay less tax. And I'm kind of going through this really uncomfortable transition that's become a big headache. It's been a bit of a challenge, but I will surely let you know, and you can consider subscribing for future updates when I do buy it back into Mindmed. And I pray to God that I'm not paying a higher premium than I sold it for. But growth stocks are trending down right now. It's not just Mindmed, guys. The whole sector of growth, speculation, and SPAC are crashing, and could be a good buying opportunity. But I pass the question off to you. What do you think about Cathie Wood's opinion on Mindmed in that comment section below? But stay cool, stay awesome, and I look forward to catching you tomorrow.